Hello again everyone, welcome to my reflection video on chapter 119 of Seraph of the End. So fandom response to this chapter has been pretty positive overall. There seems to have not been much drama because we've all kind of collectively agreed that this was awesome. It was a whole chapter of Mika and you working out their differences, coming to the conclusion that they're going to fight together in order to survive and they're not going to be anybody's puppets. So, I mean, as far as a chapter plotline goes, who can argue with that? We can argue about the execution, obviously, like how well was this written, and I have seen some, valid criticisms of that, which we'll come on to in a bit. But overall, I mean, I was a happy girl after this chapter. So this video will be a longer form analysis on the points raised in the chapter. Hopefully you guys enjoy that sort of thing. It will contain shipping, it will contain swearing, so if that is not your cup of tea, this may not be the video for you. And with that, please pull up a chair, make yourselves comfortable, pour yourself a good cup of tea, and let's get into this reflection. Okay, so let's kick off with some positives then. I liked in this chapter that Mika seemed to have regained some of his agency, because immediately prior to this in 118 I was saying that I felt like their dialogue at the end there was extremely unbalanced, that you were saying I'm going to push ahead with this and I'm going to do what I want, and it felt more like Mika was being pushed to one side as, the help. It's like, you are my demon, Mika, you are going to help me whether you want to or fucking not. It didn't feel right, it didn't feel balanced. And we've seen like previously as well where Mika objects to use kind of selfishness and he just gets overridden, and I was getting pretty sick of that. So this chapter seemed to be an improvement on that, because at the very end there, it looks like Mika's got some determination to fight for himself, which is really, really good. Now, I don't think this is perfect. Personally, my ideal scenario would be that Mika is like, oh my God, it was never my fault that the orphans got killed. It was all Ferid, Guren, and these other motherfuckers with their grand plans of bullshit. You're right, we're going to fight together. We're going to fight to bring everyone back. That would be my ideal scenario of Mika gaining some of his self-esteem back and wanting to fight, not just, wanting to fight for you, but wanting to fight for himself. And I don't think we're quite there yet, but at least he's found a will to go on in this chapter. And I think that that is exemplified in that line, your happiness is my happiness. So he's not like, perfectly regained his own agency, because he's still acting always in Yu's interests, or what he assumes, Yu's interests are. That's a key point, because Mika likes to think that he knows best, but he doesn't. As Yu so expertly points out in this chapter, Mika does not know what is best for you always. So yeah, it isn't perfect, but I do think that Mika at the end of this chapter is kind of seeing a way forward for himself and has kind of concluded that, this might actually be okay if I can be happy too. Because at the very end there, we don't just see that he agrees to go along with you, we see in his mind he visualizes the orphans running away. And I think that that panel is actually visualizing them escaping, like if they had actually escaped and survived, and if Mika's plan had worked. I think that's what the last panel is. I don't think it's a flashback to when it all went wrong. I think that that is like Mika visualizing a way out. I think that's what it is. Let me know if you disagree with that interpretation, because that is just an art panel and that is not my game. Analysing art is not my game. So yeah, I think that that is Mika regaining some of his hope and, wanting to do this for himself in the end, because Yu has given him that confidence that you are wonderful, you are smart. The fact that your plan went wrong before was, nothing to do with you being at fault. It was the situation we were in. We just weren't powerful enough to stop the people that were manipulating us. Like, Yu has actually said that to Mika now, which is fucking brilliant. It wasn't the clearest wording. Again, Yu is not explicitly naming that these are the people that did this to you, Mika. But what we got, I think, was imperfect, but definitely a step in the right direction overall. It's good to see him like finally believing in his own capabilities again, thanks to you kind of like giving him hope. And Yu has always been like a source of hope for Mika, right? Going all the way back to chapter 1. Plus the fact that Mika actually got to fight back in this chapter, I think was really important. Even though like he came round in the end to agreeing with you, the fact that he actually got to really strongly voice the fact that he was pissed off at Yu for everything that Yu has done. Forcing him to devour Ashura, making Mika give up his power. These were all things that made me really uncomfortable, because we never got to see Mika's kind of reaction to being forced. I never really liked that. So the fact that we got to see him clearly saying to you, I am not happy with this, you are going against my will, I think that that was really, really valuable. The next thing that I'd like to talk about is chapter 90. So that might seem like a really odd thing to bring up right now, but I do feel like it's necessary, because the events of chapter 90, what happened to that? What happened to that? Are we thinking that Mika still doesn't remember what happened to him in chapter 90 and that Yu is hiding it from him? Because like originally that's kind of the impression that I got, especially because in 1110 it was shown that you can actually hide memories from Mika and bring the shutters down. So I was like, okay, well that's got to serve a purpose, right? But I don't get why he would now need to hide that particular memory. Obviously I'm talking about the I love you, but not only the I love you, I'm thinking about Guren slicing him in half, because it would make sense up until Guren's plan was revealed, the fact that it didn't include Mika. Until that point, it would make sense that you would need to hide any kind of wrongdoing of Guren from Mika, because otherwise Mika wouldn't have gone along and, you know, trusted Guren to go to the underground bunker, right? But now that we know that Guren, you know, never intended to bring Mika back, surely you can now show that memory to Mika if he was hiding it. That's just an assumption that I'm making, obviously. And yeah, justice for my boy. Justice for my boy. He needs to be given access to this if he doesn't have it. But actually at this point, I'm kind of thinking that it might not be addressed, which is really depressing. I'm kind of thinking that maybe Mika does have the memory. He has seen it and just hasn't really reacted to it. Sometimes in this story, the characters don't react as you would think to certain events. The whole thing where Mika in this chapter is saying that Guren is trustworthy, I don't think that that has like any bearing on the past events at all. I think he's just saying what he needs to say to get you to go along with giving him up and, you know, to continue living, have kids smile and all this stuff that we don't believe in. Because we're on the Mika Yu ship. So yeah, I think that Mika is just saying what he needs to say in this chapter and he's a lying little shit as per usual. I don't think that it's indicative that he's, you know, actually changed his opinion about Guren or like any indication if he remembers past memories or not. I think he was literally just saying what he had to say. It's also possible though that Mika might be saying that Guren is trustworthy insofar that he does appear to genuinely care for you based on what he's seen from Guren training you up and so on. I kind of get the impression that when Mika says that he trusts Guren, I don't think that he personally like trusts the man, but I think that he maybe trusts Guren to look after you in the event that Mika is not around anymore. I think that that probably explains that particular line that made a lot of people very angry. Oh, and just for the record, I'm not actually endorsing the fact that Mika may well think this about Guren. At all, because I don't trust Yu's role in Guren's grand plan, because remember, Guren needs him for the resurrection. I don't trust what needing him entails. I think he might have a sinful key inside him, and we've seen what has to happen in order to get sinful keys out of people, so park that for now. Next part then, who is Yuichiro Hyakuya? Yu's character is still driving me up the bloody wall. Only a couple of chapters ago, Yu was like, I don't care about humanity, I'm saving Mika. And we were all like, yay, corruption arc, villain Yu, we're all on board with this. And now we suddenly like, we're going to save everyone, Mika. It's fine. So that is a bit of a switch. So I was really like confused by this initially. I was like, oh, it doesn't make any sense. I'm going to run with this though. I think that Yu knows that Mika would not be able to forgive himself if he was brought back at the expense of everybody else. Because, you know, he's got the whole survivor's guilt thing like really, really bad from when the orphans died. And he can't bear Yu to sort of repeat the same mistake. So I think that just like Mika is saying that he trusts Guren, I think that Yu is saying we're going to save everyone, Mika. I think it's a similar thing where they're trying to, you know, act in the other one's interest. I think that Yu is happy, like if they can find a solution where they can bring everyone back, perfect. But I think that Yu wouldn't actually care if he had to make the choice. I think that if Yu had to make the choice, he would give up humanity and just bring Mika back. But I think that for Mika's own well-being, Yu would prefer now to bring back everybody and therefore alleviate Mika's guilt and suffering. And I think the really important thing as well is that Yu puts the onus on Mika to sort of start thinking about how to do that. Not to say that Yu isn't going to be there to support him, but he's saying, Mika, like, you're smart, you can do this, come up with the plan. And like, yeah, in Mika we trust. In Mika we trust because he is smart. He is the brains in the entire operation. Most of the time he is the brains. So I think that that is why Yu said what he said. But that doesn't change an issue that I have with the writing. Sorry to moan about the writing again. In my opinion, we as readers shouldn't have to do so much legwork to try and unpick what on the surface and what is presented to us doesn't make sense. We shouldn't have to be trying to always look behind the meaning of these words that seemingly contradict earlier statements. It's fun to an extent, but it does get tiring. It gets exhausting. And this is one of the things that I actually really like about Kagami's novels. I've read a bit of Catastrophe. Sorry, I sound like I've read his whole works. I haven't. But what I did like in Catastrophe, at least, is the way that you get to see that when Guren is being deceptive, you can see inside his thought process and therefore understand why his actions don't match his motives. And that is, I think, sorely missing in the manga. We really, really need to see more inside of characters' heads. Yu's especially, because I still don't feel like I know who Yu is. He has these individual moments of, yes, Yu, go get him, you're awesome, you're amazing. But then you start to think back and it's like, but earlier on you said XYZ and it doesn't make sense that you've now changed your tune. And just some of his actions we could really do with looking inside his mind and what he's thinking when he says something. The forgiveness in 112 is a great example, because that could have really easily been communicated to readers in a way that we would understand it more. Sorry for bringing up 112. Dark days for the fandom, am I right, guys? And yeah, most recently this U-turn about I don't care about humanity till we're going to save everyone. This can be written in a way that makes sense. It's just, I feel like it's not quite being tied together right now. I hope that's fair. I hope that's a fair criticism. And the other point that I would say about who is Yuichiro Hyakuya is this whole thing about bringing everyone back and his character progression. We liked the idea of him choosing Mika over everyone else because it shows that he's realised that he can't get everything without paying a price, The whole point with Yu is that he's always wanted everybody to love him and he's wanted to sort of please everyone. And we thought that he'd kind of learned that you can't please everybody and sometimes you have to make these really hard decisions and therefore save Mika over humanity. So yeah, I can't see how, even though I really want Mika to come up with this super awesome plan where everyone is saved, I don't see how you can have that ending and have it be a good thing for you as a character, because it shows that he hasn't developed or learned a lesson from his previous greedy nature. That makes sense? I hope that makes sense. This is really hard to articulate. So yeah, just a few interesting points about Yu's character there, I thought, and still not sure what to make of him. I don't dislike him, but I can't fully get on board with him either, because I just feel like I don't really know who the boy is. So the next point that we need to address is the issue of physical violence between Mika and Yu. Now, I think this is a valid criticism. I thought it was a really interesting point that was brought up by the fandom on Twitter. And yeah, it's a valid criticism. It's a valid criticism because we don't want to see the love interests, and yes, I am going to call them the love interests. I don't give a shit anymore. We don't want to see the love interests hitting each other, generally speaking, do we? I know that some people like those kind of stories. I am definitely not one of those people. I hate any kind of abuse between love interests in stories. I can't stand, the tsundere girl who wants to smack her boyfriend around because he's being a dumbass. Can't stand that. I also can't stand romances that are built fundamentally on an abusive premise. So I'm thinking something like No Money in the BL genre. I refuse to read that story because the actual premise of it disgusts me. Genuinely disgusts me. That's where I'm coming from. Call me old-fashioned, but I just like to see a genuinely loving relationship between the characters. So yeah, seeing Mika and Yu fight in this chapter is grounds for definitely valid criticism of the relationship. So the things to say about this, I think there's kind of 3 points that I'd bring up. The first is that this is a shonen at the end of the day. Shonens like their fight scenes. It's the bread and butter, right? So, of course, any kind of emotional discussion tends to be backed up with some kind of physical action sequence, and that's just kind of how it is in shonen. You've also got to think about the fact that these are not human beings that we're looking at here. Yu literally fell off Tokyo Tower in this chapter, landed on his feet and survived the fall. So, the physical impact of having a fist fight, probably not like having a fist fight between two people in an ordinary setting. And the last thing I'd point out is that this actually has a narrative callback to the first chapter, episode 1. Yu smacks Mika in the face because he's giving his blood to Ferid. He's sacrificing himself for Yu's well-being, and Yu does not fucking like that in chapter 1, but he can't do anything about it in the first chapter. He can't change the outcome. In this chapter, Yu again strikes Mika, and this time it's to get through to him, look, stop sacrificing yourself for me. The problem that they had before is that Mika came up with the plan all on his own, like he was brilliant at doing it, but like he came up with it all on his own, he did everything on his own, he took everything on himself, and then the plan failed. This time you is like, no, come on. We do this together, we're both going to live, we're both going to magically resurrect everybody. So he smacks Mika, and it actually kind of works to change Mika's mind and to actually make him go, okay, maybe we can actually try doing this together this time. So it does serve a purpose. It serves to contrast how powerless they were in episode 1, chapter 1, compared to how they are now, where they've actually got enough power to take control of their own fate. That's the point, I think, of that punching scene. And if also you look at the expressions of the characters when that punch happens, like Mika's fucking shocked. Mika is shocked to be smacked in the face like that by Yu. And equally, you can see the pain on Yu's face when he deals that blow to Mika. He is not enjoying himself. This is not like typical sadistic behaviour from Yu. Like, he does not enjoy having to do this to Mika. He's doing this to get through to him. These are ridiculous stakes in a ridiculous story. And sometimes, you know, extraordinary circumstances require extraordinary measures. And to be honest, if I were in their shoes and like someone that I love wasn't listening to me and was intent on killing themselves for me, would I smack them? I might. Honestly, I might. So yeah, even though it's not great, I would prefer it obviously that they never hit each other. I think that actually it does have a reason to be here in this chapter. And I think that, as I say, it's not indicative of their overall relationship. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it. I'm willing to give it a pass on that basis. I feel like other people in the fandom, most of us also gave it a pass. I think just because we all looked at each other and thought, well, these are really high stakes, it's a shonen anime, they need a fight, of course there's going to be a physical fight scene. I think it basically came down to that, but not saying that interpretation is right. Let me know what you guys think. This is just a little fun segment that I just wanted to add in. A weird translation in this chapter where Yu talks about offing himself. So I didn't realise how weird this was until people who are not English were talking about this line on Twitter and saying, that's such an odd choice of word. What does that even mean? I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, if I've got any American viewers here, do you guys use that expression to off yourself? Because that to me is extremely like British English. We might say that as a joke, like in relation to ourselves. For example, God, if John in that meeting asks one more fucking question, I'm going to off myself. Or we might say it about someone that we don't particularly like. For example, if a celebrity in the media takes their life, when we don't particularly like that celebrity, we might be a bit disparaging about them. We might be like, oh, he offed himself, did he? Basically, Kagami, are you sending your editing team to watch my videos? And are you like taking slang from me? Because I highly advise against that. I thought it was suspect when they released teacups for Mika and Yu. I was like, I always tell people to drink tea in my introductions. Very interesting coincidence. I'm just kidding. Or maybe that's like the secret behind Yu's mysterious blood. Maybe he's got a bit of the older English tea drinking spirit in there somewhere. And I have to claim him as one of my own. Good Lord. Okay, it's time for me to talk about the thing that I think everyone wants me to talk about, because people love drama and ship wars are a great source of drama, right? So, is it dead? Is Yunoa actually dead based on 119? I'm going to say it's like 95% dead at this point. I'm not fully there. I'll explain why I'm not fully there. This chapter basically confirms that until Mika is alive, well, safe, at Yu's side, Yu doesn't have any interest in anyone else. That is what this chapter confirms. Yu is not emotionally available to any women at the moment. But I would just advise maybe a little bit of caution towards the Mika Yu fans, because you're completely right and I'm completely like emotionally on board with you guys that to date, the ship that is being pushed is Mika Yu. It is not Yunoa. But I could see this happening, for example, like a time skip epilogue where Yu's had a chance to heal, Mika is there with him at his side, his kind of, what would you call it, heterosexual life partner. And, you know, they are best bros forever, like they love each other very much in a very platonic way. And then once Yu's had like a few years to heal, maybe Shinoa comes back into the picture and Yu can then return her feelings in some kind of time skip and we see them getting married at like 30 or whatever. I could see that possibly being pulled as a bullshit ending to the story. Now, I do think that that would be like a betrayal of the readers, because as we know, the majority of the fan base likes the boys together much more because it's had the most development compared to Yunoa. There's obviously a bit of a question mark on both sides about to what extent the feelings between each couple are kind of genuine or being coerced and manipulated, because Shinoa was kind of pushed down that route by her sister and Guren, And equally, we don't exactly know what the boy's past is, and this whole thing about you being a sacrifice, the whole psychic link between him and Mika, like there's possible manipulation on both sides here, but of the two couples, Mika Yu is the one that has the most development, and I think that is why the majority of the fan base goes for them, because the moments that we see between them that seem genuinely loving and caring, the mutual ones are pretty much all on Mika Yu's side rather than Yunoa's, which is always like really painfully one-sided, and I feel so sorry for the poor girl. I just want to give her a hug. As I say, I feel like if Kagami were to backtrack at the 12th hour and do a Yunoa epilogue ending or something like that, I feel like it would be a betrayal. But still, I'm gonna like prepare myself mentally for that possibility, because as I say, in this chapter, even though we get so many kind of important lines that confirm where Yu's headspace is at, he doesn't explicitly say that Mika is going to be his romantic partner in the future. We don't get that on-the-nose confirmation. But what we do get is really, really good. What we get is Mika comparing Yu's ideal, I use that in quotation marks, ideal future life, you know, have kids, smile, go and return that Shinoa girl's feelings. He compares that directly to Yu's obsession with him, literally one sentence apart. So that is quite telling, because it shows where Yu's, you know, priorities lie, and that Mika's weight in his mind is equivalent to all of those wonderful kind of traditional possibilities on the other. That is Mika's importance to you. We also get the infamous line, how can you imagine that I can go on without you in my life? I'm paraphrasing that, but I'll put the image on the screen. We get that wonderful line there from Yu. And like I say, the only thing with that line is that he doesn't exactly specify how he sees Mika being in his life, you know. We also get a handhold, which I think is really important. They've done that a lot. Ever since Mika came back as a demon, there's been a lot of hand-holding. I've noticed that. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, because obviously I'm not Japanese, but I think that that is quite a significant thing between couples in Japan. Like, it has a lot more significance than a couple in the West holding hands. Like, to display a handhold in Japanese media is usually indicative of romantic intent. Even though these handholds are quite ambiguous in how they're portrayed, you'll notice that, you know, there's no intertwined fingers, for example. It's an important thing. I need some intertwined fingers, Kagami, come on. We also get them being on Tokyo Tower, which I understand is like a famous date spot in Japan. So that's interesting. It's funny because I had no idea of that. I made a comment during the reaction that, oh, like, Yu wants to have a romantic moment with you, Mika. He wants to see the view with you. Go up and join him. It turns out that it's actually a date spot. So that's really funny. So yeah, we've got Tokyo Tower. We've got the whole thing about you need to try and return Shinoa's feelings and give up on your obsession with me. And then we have Yu saying that he can't see a future without Mika in it. So like, those lines are really, really important. And I think the final one that I would like to point out is the one where he says that I've got no intention of living all on my own. So that kind of implies that even if Yu brings back the rest of the world successfully, he will still feel that he is alone unless Mika is living with him. You know, like, he wants Mika to be by his side specifically, and nobody else will do. So that is, I think, quite telling, because even though he doesn't specify that he wants Mika to be like with him romantically, the fact that you don't want to live with anybody else, is that not basically a marriage proposal? I would say so. Okay, so predictions for the next chapter then. I'm going to keep this short and sweet because they haven't really changed. I kind of think that they're going to end up meeting up with Shikama and maybe go through their memories. And to be honest, I just really want the plot answers revealed now. I've been saying for like 10 chapters, can we just get like 40 solid pages of plot reveal and ancient Greece flashbacks? Like, just give me that. It will be so delicious. That's all I want at this point. I don't know if anybody else feels the same, but I kind of want the story to be neatly wrapped up now. I want it to give us lots of meaty chapters and to bring this whole thing to a satisfying conclusion, because it kind of feels like we're in the final arc. And yeah, I'm kind of ready for it to end. Sorry if that sounds a bit depressing, but I'm ready for this to come to a satisfying close. Maybe it's just because I have too much going on in my life. I'm just like, right, can this story please get out of my brain so I can concentrate on like my other stuff? Seriously, I love Seraph. It's a weird story that isn't like top level, but it's got so many interesting elements, and you can drive yourself around the twist with it. It's so interesting in its own special way. But yeah, good things must come to an end, and sometimes stories that go on indefinitely suffer for that length. So I'm ready for Kagami to start hitting us with the real heavy plot now, please. Like, please, 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 please give us plot answers. Okay, so that was my reflection to chapter 119 of Seraph of the End. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe. You can also connect with me on social media. I'll put the links in the description below. And with that, you take care of yourselves. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.